And then I would have anxiety and panic attacks from being so amped up from the show. I would have to drink like a bottle of Jack Daniels. And then when I would drink, the pills would wear off. And then I would be an idiot and I'd like black out and embarrass myself. So I started doing cocaine to balance out, so I could have control over my behavior. And then I couldn't sleep and I needed to sleep so my voice could recover from all the partying. So I would take pills, sleeping pills or Xanax to pass out. And that became every day.
Holics.com, in partnership with Heartsupport and the Global Recovery Initiatives Foundation, is proud to present High Notes, a podcast about addiction and recovery in the music industry. I'm your host, James Shotwell. My guest this episode is Tommy Vext, the frontman and lead vocalist for Bad Wolves, an American rock band whose sophomore album, Nation, is available now worldwide. When we first started planning for High Notes, Tommy was one of the first artists that we decided to talk to. He is not only recognized for a long history in the world of rock and roll, but he also has another profession in the world of recovery. You see, Tommy is not only a sober person, he helps coach other people on their recovery, and we wanted to know how he fell into that line of work. But before we get there, Tommy is going to take us back to the beginning, to discuss how childhood traumas, coupled with a low sense of self-esteem, led him to fall into bad behaviors that would take him years to break out of. And even when he got into music, his problems only got worse for many years before he made a decision to better himself. But when he did, his life began to change in ways he could not imagine. When I call Tommy to have this conversation, it's early April, and he tells me that he's about to celebrate a major milestone in his recovery journey. It's something that he never thought possible a decade ago, but is now just weeks away from happening. And when I ask what that thing is, here's what he tells me.
I've been sober since May 18th of 2009, so that is, 10 years and almost 11 months. So just shy, about 10 years, 10 and a half months.
That's incredible, man. I can hear it in your voice that you're a little surprised it's been that long yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess time just kind of goes by, and then all of a sudden you do these things and your life gets better. It's weird.
One of the things that we've learned over and over again throughout High Notes is that everyone's journey to recovery is different. Everyone falls into these habits for their own reasons, and everyone makes the choice to get clean for their own reasons. So I was curious, what was the thing in the days leading up to Tommy's decision that changed his life?
My last day getting wasted was not that spectacular. Like, it wasn't like an overdose. I had overdosed a month and a half prior to that. Didn't think anything of it. The last day I drank, I did so much blow and drank so much that I got sick and I thought I had to go to the hospital, and I was staying at my friend's house and he wouldn't take me to the hospital. Like, he thought I was making it up. I fell asleep on the bathroom floor and I woke up and I had like vomited all over myself, and I was like then just being embarrassed trying to have to clean it up, before my friend woke up, and like that was it. I just heard a voice and I was like, okay, I'm done now.
Tommy just touched on something that I think is really important. Sometimes when addicts decide that they want to make a change, people in their lives don't take them seriously, at least not at first. As Tommy said, his friend didn't really believe him when he said he needed to go to the hospital. And that made me wonder who did listen to Tommy, who pointed him in the right direction so that he could change his life.
I called so at the time I was singing for a band called Snot, and there was a lot of arguing going on within the band after tours, and there were just like different issues going on. And my guitar player at the time, Sonny, I called him and I was like, hey, can you come get me? Like, I'm not doing good. And he came and got me, and I think I need to get sober. And I was homeless at the time. He let me stay on his couch, and it was supposed to be for like a week, and it turned into 3 months. And the next day I went to some group meetings, like a 12-step group meeting. And then I just stayed and then got a job, and then Snot broke up 2 days later, and I just was like, I need to be sober. That was the beginning, but I didn't have some like revelation, like, oh, things are going to be different now. Like, I was pretty much suicidally depressed after having lost a baby the year before and having gone through a traumatic relationship, all the emotional issues I never dealt with in childhood and as an adolescence. And what happens is that when you get sober, the good news is you get all your feelings back, but the bad news is you get all of your feelings back. It was not easy. That first year was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do. At least at that point, that's what I thought. So my first year of sobriety, I had no car. I was like couch surfing, and then I wound up applying for a financial scholarship to live in a sober living. So I moved into a men's sober house. I worked at a dog kennel, and then I was a bouncer at a bar, of all things, to make ends meet. And I was taking the bus all over LA, going to meetings, and I just did what I was told. I asked people for help, and I asked them to teach me like how to stay sober, and they told me, and I did what they said, and things got better. A year came up pretty fast. In retrospect, it felt like it would took forever. I remember being like 9 months sober. Oh, why is this taking so long? I'm like, oh, I don't even know where the time goes. It just goes by in a flash.
It's probably clear by now that Tommy has a lot of stories to share, but before we get too deep into his sobriety, I wanted him to take us back to the beginning, to talk about his childhood and when he first got into drugs and alcohol. That question led him to reflect not only on his youth, but how he got into music and how his problems only grew worse with time.
I was kind of awkward when I was like 12 and 13, and then there were some older kids like down the street from me, and the first time I got drunk was like at a summer block party, and we had to steal booze. And then my friend threw up on himself, and then we were afraid to go home because he thought his dad was gonna beat him. Because, so we had to switch shirts, and then we came home, and his parents were drunk, and so they didn't notice. And then we were like, oh, okay. And then the next day I smoked weed, and then it was just kind of like smoking pot turned into taking LSD, and taking LSD turned into snorting Special K, and snorting Special K turned into snorting cocaine and ecstasy, and then it became selling drugs to pay for a drug habit, or just pay for money, just have money to have clothes. I grew up very poor. My family was a broken home. My brother was mentally ill and a drug addict. My father was a fall down drunk. My mother and my sister, they left. My mom took my sister and kind of ran away from the house because it was not a safe place. The only thing I did right during those years was I was like obsessed with music, and I'd been in a band since I was 14. I didn't want to lose being in a band, so there was like things I wouldn't do, where a lot of the other guys that I ran with wound up, a lot of them ended up getting killed or overdosing or ended up in jail. I had a couple of scrapes, where I was like, I got jumped, and me and my friends got jumped, and a bunch of gang members hit me with a car and then beat up me and my friend with baseball bats and fractured the front of my skull and almost broke my legs. And that was like when I realized I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I'm not selling drugs. I don't want to be a tough guy. Like, this shit is stupid. I started focusing all my efforts into music. I had this idea that where I came from was the reason why I had problems. And I'm sure that living where I lived, impoverished and ghetto, it comes with problems, And the thing that I didn't identify was the fact that I had alcoholism, and that no matter where I went, that was going to travel with me. I gave up selling drugs, and I started working at venues doing security through a promoter that used to book my band. And then I was good at it. And it was like, I was already like accustomed to physical altercation. So when fights would break out and other people were trepidatious to get involved, there were me and a couple guys who were like, would run in, and we weren't afraid to break things up. And and then I found a job, and then I used that job to meet people in the music industry and get numbers and network. And then my band got a record deal on an independent label, and then we did some shitty van tours on the East Coast with bands that we really loved, and hardcore bands playing for 200 people a night, and we thought we made it, and then that was short-lived. And eventually I got in touch with Dino from Fear Factory, and I auditioned to be in what would become Divine Heresy, which was the first band I was ever signed to a big label. I was on Roadrunner Records in half the world territory, and the other half we were on Century Media. And I moved to Los Angeles to be in this band, and I thought that I was going to be safe. But I took my disease, like the disease of alcoholism and drug addiction, I took it with me. More of the same bullshit kept happening. It was a different environment. And then I was also alone. I didn't have my crew of guys. So I became hyper aggressive as a result, because I was used to, going out, and there was, probably going to be some bullshit every single time I went out with my friends. There would always be a fight. There would always be some kind of violence or drama. And that's just how we lived growing up. It was just bad things would always happen. So I took that with me here, and then had to learn how to not live like that. and kind of calm down and realize that people are way laid back here. I discovered methamphetamine in Los Angeles. I started hanging out in the porn scene. I had friends there, and then that's a place where people had money and did a lot of drugs, and hung out there, and I did a lot of drugs, and things got progressively worse. I'm just chronologically going through this. You can stop me at any time.
No, it's great. No, you're doing good. You're like you do the follow-up questions for me.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I recently co-wrote my biography, and so I'm like just going through the pages in my head. I'm like, yeah, then this happened, then that happened. And I met this girl at the Rainbow. I actually met her at the Knitting Factory at Five Finger Death Punch show that they got their record deal at in 2007. I went to the Rainbow to meet up with Ivan to have drinks, and she was there too. And I was like, yo, who are you? Yeah, I just like started talking to her, and I got her number, and she wouldn't go out with me. I asked her out on a date every day for 30 days. And then she finally said yes. And then, she was an addict too. And she was into heroin. She had like been off heroin for a while while she was living in Japan working. And we wound up like moving in together immediately. And then we partied, we drank, we did drugs, and she got pregnant, and we both had to stop. I think when I was 26 years old, she was about 6.5 months pregnant. She relapsed on heroin. She got really sick. She almost died. The baby died. And, the relationship obviously did not recover from that. I was suicidally depressed, surmounting tensions within my band. I wound up getting into a fist fight with my guitar player on stage. And then I was out of that band. Then I auditioned for a different band. I joined a bigger band. Got rid of my apartment. I left. Like, we broke up, and she kept the apartment, and I just stayed homeless and went on tour and lived out of a suitcase. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna work out every day, and like I'm gonna go for a run, and da da da. And I was like, yeah, we're going on tour. We're gonna be healthy. And by the third day, I was like, drinking right after we got off stage. I was taking diet pills to go on stage because I had body dysmorphia, and I believed that I was obese because I used to be obese and I had lost over 100 pounds. I was chewing down diet pills to have energy to go on stage. And then I would have anxiety and panic attacks from being so amped up from the show. I would have to drink like a bottle of Jack Daniels. And then when I would drink, the pills would wear off, and then I would be an idiot, and I'd like black out and embarrass myself. So I started doing cocaine to balance out, so I could have control over my behavior. And then I couldn't sleep, and I needed to sleep so my voice could recover from all the partying. So I would take pills, sleeping pills or Xanax to pass out. And that became every day, and like I had all these ambitions of waking up at 10 o'clock in the morning to go work out every day. And then now I'm waking up at 5 o'clock, getting pushed on stage, showing where the bathroom is, showering, going on stage, and then starting all over again. I knew there was something wrong, and I was slipped back into a depression. Like, I didn't have the high from being on stage every night. And I had no money. I spent all the money I made on getting high. And I'm trying to think of what happened, but I had a bunch of shows, and then I went to New Orleans. I overdosed in New Orleans with a girl that I met at the first bar I went to when I got there, who wound up being a stripper and a drug dealer. And so I shacked up with her for a couple of days, and then got a little too high, and I passed out and woke up with people pounding on my chest, resuscitating me. Still didn't get sober, flew back to LA. A couple weeks later, I was on my friend's bathroom floor saying, I can't do this anymore. I was too afraid to commit suicide. I was too chicken shit to put a gun in my mouth and blow my head off. And I was too chicken shit to like face reality.
Some fans may have a hard time believing the Tommy Vext that is telling this story is the same man that stands on stage with Bad Wolves. Anyone that has seen Tommy perform knows that he's this larger-than-life figure, standing over 6 feet tall, covered head to toe in tattoos and muscles, who is always encouraging people to live their best lives and take care of themselves. But something I've learned is that there are many addicts who possess the ability to care and empathize with others in ways that they cannot care and empathize for themselves. As many people will tell you, self-care is an art form, and it takes years to learn.
I was a fat kid, and I used to get teased and made fun of for being fat. And I grew up, I'm also like mixed race, and it was not socially acceptable in the 90s and the early 2000s to be mixed race. And so I got bullied until I like grew into my body. I used to get picked on. I used to get like held down, and the kids would burn me with cigarettes and lighters and call me the N-word. And then I never forgot any of that. And most of those people, when I was 16, I joined the gym and I met some guys and they taught me how to work out. And then I basically like kept tabs and beat the shit out of anybody that ever fucked with me when I was a kid, and pretty violently. I broke some people's faces, and anger has always been a pretty dark passenger that I struggled with till I got into recovery, and it still has a propensity to come out. And I think that trauma lives in your body. You have to, I think, meditation and prayer is a practice of consciously being willing to surrender and let go of trauma, and that also starts with forgiveness, forgiving yourself and forgiving people that do things to harm you, because it's not personal. Most people who hurt other people, they're just hurt. It's a transference of aggression or a transference of abuse. And I've experienced this in intimate relationships with women who are either like physically and sexually abused by their fathers or a family member. And, you think you're dating one person and then they get triggered and all of a sudden they like attack you in any kind of way that a person can be attacked. I think as I've gotten older, when I come into contact with that kind of stuff, you understand it, and you don't have to like get that. You don't have to add that to the list of your trauma. You just can say, no, thank you.
Tommy is making a great point about loving and knowing people who have been through traumatic experiences. Sometimes when a person has suffered trauma, they develop these defense mechanisms that I would describe as being razor sharp. They can cut you down in an instant, even if the person isn't meaning to harm you. And understanding what those triggers are, as well as how to react to them, can make a major difference in how we not only react to one another, but how we treat ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, I have that too. It's just I have to just, I don't need to reach for that. Those behaviors and reactions are based on a mentality of scarcity, and the scarcity within the dynamic of people who are raised in abusive and violent households and settings is that love is the scarcity, and that love is conditional. It's not unconditional, and that it's a contract, and a lot of people like that, including myself, I had to do work to redefine what that means. It's a lot of people are like, oh, I love you, so you have to do this and I have to do that. And I'm like, that's not love.
Tommy is making a great argument for every person hearing this podcast today to try therapy. Whether or not you're addicted to anything or you feel that you've been through a traumatic experience, going to therapy can help you gain a better understanding of yourself and what makes you tick, and how to deal with problems that you may not even realize that you're struggling with right now. As you can hear, Tommy has done a lot of work with his therapist to understand who he is and why he's behaved the way he has in the past. Which makes me wonder, when he looks back at his life prior to getting sober, the person that he was over 10 years ago, how does that person make him feel? And does he even recognize the person he once was?
Throughout the years of my sobriety, I picked up so many tools, and I'm a huge, I think that therapy is really important. And I go to therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder, which got reanimated pretty heavily after my brother tried to murder me, which took place in sobriety when I was about a year and 3 months sober. It's just like that whole thing. Like I had all these expectations that, oh, I'm sober now, life's going to be like this. I have all these ambitions. And then, I have this drug addict, mentally ill family member beat me to death, literally beat me until I lost my pulse with a crowbar. I lost my spleen. He burst my spleen, fractured my skull, and broke my arm into two pieces. Having to come back from that. The way that I kind of look at who I was before I was in recovery is like, it's like my kid. And for most of my childhood, most of my life, and as a young man, I was a scared child. The violence it's a demonstration of sheer terror and anxiety. And, it's the way that a lot of masculine energy protects itself when you're just being a hurt child. And I didn't know that I was allowed to grieve. What happens is that when we don't grieve, that energy gets trapped, and then we start to build up a defense mechanism against ever being hurt again, because we never accept what's happened to us. And so that is either protected by, we either become disassociative, love avoidant, we can become aggressive, we can become hyper promiscuous. I mean, there are so many different ways it affects different people because people are essentially different. But these negative living patterns are the result of these traumas. I had to practice literally meditating and talking to the little kid in me and holding his hand and being like, I'm in charge now. And I'm not going to let anybody hurt you. You don't have to freak out. You don't have to be scary or mean to keep people from hurting you. I am in charge now, and you're going to be okay. And I need you to go sit down in your chair. And then that practice is like, it's so essential in not reacting, non-reactivity. Because life will push your buttons, stress will push your buttons, like everything that's beyond the scope of our control that we're dealing with now pushes people's buttons. You have to take a personal responsibility to protect your energy and to protect your vulnerability, or you're going to react. You're going to be reactive in a way that is destructive and not positive.
I know that some of you are probably hoping that we'll spend more time talking about Tommy's relationship with his brother, and we will to an extent, but that is a topic that he's covered many times and even written songs about. So if you want to know more, I encourage you to head over to Google and do some research. What we're really going to focus on is how Tommy got into the world of recovery coaching, how he found a way to help other people who are struggling with an affliction similar to his, and why that's so important to him.
Obviously, like as I said, in 2010, my brother broke into my apartment. He beat me with a crowbar. He killed me. They resuscitated me. I had like a near-death experience, and I had a white light experience. And I woke up in the ICU, and there was a guy who was friends with Sonny, who lived in New York. And Sonny had called him, and he was sober. And he said, "Can you go meet my friend? He's like, he almost died, and he needs somebody to be there when he wakes up." So that's who was there first. Like, my family wasn't there. Like, the girl I was dating wasn't there. Like, I woke up and it was the nurse, and this guy had sat there and waited just to talk to me. And I stayed sober. After I got on the other side of recovering from all that, I kept getting asked to speak. And then I got asked to speak at colleges and high schools. And I guess my story was inspirational. When I moved back to California, I was a co-founder of a nonprofit organization that I started with a buddy of mine, and we did that for a year, and then I got hired to run a sober living. And then my boss, who had heard me speak, and so he didn't really tell me much, and they started training me, and I would take classes, and I had to do these certifications and stuff. And like, I was like one of those people, like, I'll do anything. I was not doing music, and I was like, I don't know where my life is going, and I don't know what this means, but I'll do anything. And so I did. And what happened was, one day he called me and said, "Hey, I need you for a sober companion gig, and like, you're ready." I met him at this address in Beverly Hills, and I got buzzed in, and a security guard brought me to a room, and one of the most famous people in the entire world walked in the room. It was like, "Hey, what's up? I'm so-and-so." And I was like, "This is my name." And we talked, and my boss came in, and there was a doctor and a nurse. And then I wound up living with this guy, and I was, my job was to take care of him and to help him get through his first 30 days of sobriety. So that's what we did. That job came and went. I learned a lot. I got referred to another job, and then I got another job, and then I got another job, and another job, and another job. And I did all these things, right? And then I started working for myself. After about 2 years of doing that, I just decided I would start my own LLC, and I did my own company, and I went into business for myself. I brought Doc into the business, and so Doc became a counselor, and he started working with a client of mine who he actually still works with and still helps. I started making a real living, and then I put money aside to record, and then I would make albums, and I just did it because I love music. And I went out on tour like with my old band, and that kind of led me to the guys in Five Finger calling me and asking if I would be willing to go on tour and kind of, just be Ivan's buddy and like hang out with him and, be a good influence, and as everyone knows how that went. And then that turned into him, deciding that he needed to step down to go to get himself taken care of and go into rehab, asking if I would finish out the tour. And that's what happened. And then Bad Wolves was a side project that me and Doc and John were working on, and it turned into what it turned into. And Zoltan fell in love with the band. Ivan and them were like, "We'll take you out on tour. Thank you for helping us." And the rest was kind of history, And then the whole thing happened with Dolores, and then we thought we were just going to be a band that was like, oh, these guys are going to open up and this, that, and the next thing. And it turned into like this, I don't know, just like this whole thing. So, and now we're here and now we're talking.
This is a quick aside, but it leads to the next part of our conversation. In many instances, if you run into somebody super famous, like a Brad Pitt in everyday life, sometimes they'll introduce themselves to you. And it can be a really weird experience because you obviously know who that individual is. And here they are introducing themselves, telling you, hey, my name's Brad. And your brain almost breaks because you're like, obviously, you're Brad. It's polite that you're introducing yourself, but you don't really need to because everyone here knows who you are.
I mean, I've had celebrities, like I've spoken at like private meetings, and I've had celebrities introduce themselves with their like real name, but they're gargantuanly famous and like they have a professional name, and they're like, oh hey, I'm this, and I'm like, okay bro, like no you're not, like let's be honest. There was one artist who was like, I was talking about how I used to steal beer from the store, and then I would go hide with my friends in the like at the baseball field under the bleachers, and we would drink and listen to this band, like a rock band on the radio. And as I was saying the name of the band that we would listen to, the guy was literally in the meeting. I was like, yeah. Anyway, everybody laughed. They're like, yeah, it's weird now, right?
Tommy's time in recovery and the work that he's done with various recovery organizations has also influenced his creativity. In the fall of 2019, when Bad Wolves released their sophomore album, one of the tracks included was titled Sober, and it has since gone on to be a radio rock hit. But I wanted to know, when you write a song that is so direct in its message and personal and rooted in the stories of not only yourself, but the people that you've met in recovery, do you know right from the start that it's a song that you have to get out there, not just on the album, but as a track that you have to push as a single and make a video for? Do you always know that it's a song that needs its own promotional campaign because it's just that important that people need to hear it?
I mean, I remember I came home from the European tour. We went to Europe with 3 days grace, and then we had 2 weeks off before we were going back out with Five Finger and Breaking Benjamin. And I was in 2018, I was homeless again. I gave up I gave up my apartment and put all my stuff in storage because I had to fold my company to go on tour with Bad Wolves. So there's a lot of financial fear that year. I went from making like $200,000 a year to making 30. And that's what people don't realize either. Like when you're in a band, it's even if your band is successful, like you're not making money. It takes years for you to like actually catch up with that. So I basically got a hotel, and I basically had nowhere to go. I asked the label to get me a hotel so I could do writing sessions, and I went to the studio. So I literally went in and did Killing Me Slowly and Learn to Walk Again and Sober in the time span that we had, like, so I could have a hotel. And those songs just happened to be what came out. Sober is a song to me that I think there's a lot of bands and a lot of artists over the years, especially in rock, that talk about their addiction. And to be honest, a lot of it is just them talking about themselves. And that's what addicts are. Addicts and alcoholics were selfish. Having so much time to reflect in recovery, and having gone through, 12-step programs and like made amends to my family, I wanted to write a song about how our addiction affects the people who love us, tell their story. Like the bigger issue is it's not just drugs and alcohol, it's the family disease of drugs and alcohol. And it's like how much pain do we put our mothers and fathers through, or our employers, or our partners, our boyfriends, our girlfriends, our business partners, and just society as a whole. The people who love us have to watch us suffer, and they don't understand what we're going through. And so it was really important to narrate that. And I came to Nick Peterson, who did the video for Five Finger for Wrong Side of Heaven, which is my favorite Death Punch video. And I told him what I wanted to do and what I wanted to create. And every person in the music video is a real person. It's based off a real story that I've heard in recovery, and it's somebody I know. So I literally replicated the life stories of people I actually knew.
Whenever you write a song, it's really hard to know how people will react. With Sober, the fans of Bad Wolves have grown comfortable sharing their struggles with the band. So every night on tour, or even on social media, people reach out to them on a regular basis and share their journeys with recovery and their struggles to stay clean. which on the one hand is a pretty big compliment because it says that the fans feel so close to the group that they're willing to share their deepest, darkest struggles. But on the other hand, it's also a lot of weight to carry. Imagine if every day somebody came into your job and shared their struggles with you. And at first, you'd want to help that person and you would be grateful that they could trust you with what they were going through. But after a couple of days, all that weight piles up. And I was curious, how does Tommy carry it?
I talked to Jonathan Davis about this. It just like, he put out in 94, Korn's debut album had a song called Daddy on it, which was about his sexual child abuse, right? And that the courage that it took. No one has ever talked about anything like that, not so explicitly. And it just makes you feel less alone. Anybody who's going through stuff, like that's why on my Instagram all last week when the lockdown started getting really serious, like the past 2 weeks, every night I would just call fans on Instagram Live and ask them how they were doing and let them use my platform for them to express how they were feeling and their own fears and give them a voice, because we want to be heard and we want to know that we're not the only ones going through this. That's the gift that I get, being open and honest with the music, is that people come to me and they're like, me too. Like I've been dealing with, before the Me Too movement, I've been dealing with that my whole life as a songwriter. My favorite artists were always honest. And I think art that is good is honest. And that's what makes art important. It's like when Dolores died, I said this thing, we don't mourn the death of an artist because we knew them. We mourn them because they helped us know ourselves. And as I grow in learning and understanding who I am and just being a worker amongst workers and another human being on this planet, you come to realize that we're all going through the same things. And that, I just got blessed to be in an opportunity to narrate it. For us, it's like being a musician is like being Morgan Freeman, and you're just getting to narrate what everyone's experience already is anyway, if you just tell the truth.
That's a really good take on the situation. We have not had Jonathan on the show yet, but we actually do have Head from Korn on this season of the show. He told us some very crazy stories, as you can imagine. He is awesome, and one of the things we tried to do in building this season was pick people that we felt all had, like, everyone has their own story, as you just said, but people that had very specific kind of relatable qualities, like his story coming from the world of meth and the role that like his faith plays in his recovery is so important. And you have actually, transformed your own recovery into helping other people in recovery, and those kind of little things that add to your story and make it so unique, I feel just gives people a different perspective on how the recovery process goes and how things, move and change as you go through this journey. And I'm happy that you shared it with me today.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's subjective too. It's like it depends on what you're doing. I think rock fans are less judgmental because this is metal and rock is a place where all the people who don't belong finally get together and be like, we're in a club now. And this is like where I found myself and I found my people. Even before I found recovery, this is the only place I belonged. I think like pop artists, I've experienced some of the biggest pop artists having them as clients. They get so rich and famous that it actually, people hate how much other people love them. And there's a jealousy component. Whereas like, I think with the band, with like, everyone heard that James Hetfield was struggling after, 10 or 12 years of sobriety. He struggled and he had to cancel some shows and take care of his health. And everyone understands. They're like, okay. We just want you to get better. Same thing with Five Finger, like there was no blowback from me filling in for them. It was just like, we understand and we want, they love Ivan and they love the band and they want them to get back to being healthy. You don't get that in the pop world because people, they don't care. They're like, shut up and entertain me. They don't have a real connection with the music because the music isn't real. It's garbage. Everybody thinks it's a good idea. This is what Trent Reznor said this. He's like, everybody thinks it's a good idea to have birthday cake for dinner every night until everyone gets a stomach ache.
I think we all like to believe that if somebody decides to get clean and sticks with it, then one day they won't have to struggle with addiction the way they once did. So I was curious, does Tommy Vext still deal with cravings and temptations?
I mean, I haven't had a craving for anything like that. I can't even remember the last time. I think maybe it was 2012. and I had like a showcase, and I had blown my voice out, and I just like freaked out, and I was like, fuck this, like and it was like off the tails of dealing with everything of testifying for against my brother, and I was suicidally depressed. And I called my ex-girlfriend. We were living together, and I was coming from rehearsal in Jersey back to New York, Manhattan, and I was like, I think I'm going to drink. And she was like, I'm going to come meet you at the train station. She picked me up from Penn Station and brought me a sandwich, and then I went home and I didn't get drunk. That was the only time I can really remember feeling like that. There was another time where I got cheated on, but I just didn't. I was like, I'm not throwing this away, you know? And I just like, I call my guys and I talk to them, and you know, bad things happen, and you just move forward. You know, if you feel like you're gonna cry, just cry. You know, if you feel like you're gonna punch a hole in your wall, you know, put a pillow up and punch the pillow instead. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, just, you know, yeah. There's that great Sylvester Stallone quote in the Rocky movie, the Return Rocky movie, where he talks about, it's not about how hard you can hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep forward, you know, because life will beat you down and it'll hold you down, but who you are is determined by how many times you get back up. And it's the same thing in the music industry or any industry. Like, I'm not special, I'm just too stubborn to quit. Like, I failed more times than I was successful. I was only successful one time. Like, people can't see how many times I failed. I've been in 7 bands over the course of 20 years. I failed every time. So there were bands that never got off the ground. It happened because there was like, oh, this isn't the right group. This isn't the right. And it's just like relationships. It's just like, you know, if it's not working, you just got to keep moving. Keep it moving.
We recorded this episode of High Notes in the middle of April, roughly 1 month after the coronavirus pandemic led the majority of the United States to shut down. And that isolation can be a dangerous thing for people on the path to recovery. So I wanted to ask Tommy, for fans out there who may be caught in the struggle and feeling alone and scared and stressed, what advice does he have to offer?
I tell people, pick up the phone, call people. If you have a network, call them. There's also online, Zoom has been hosting thousands of recovery meetings. You can call central office, you know, and everybody, you could just Google the number. It's called central office, and they have one for every city. And then you could just ask them where a meeting is, and you could talk to other people. They could be anonymous, or maybe you have friends, you'll know them. But, you know, I think it's good for everybody to check on each other. You know, I've been telling everyone, check on your strong friends. You know, I've been doing, every day I try to do one act. Like, I have no control over coronavirus. So all I can do is and I'm coming off a breakup. I literally went through a breakup, and then we went into lockdown. So thank God I had moved my stuff out, you know, the few days before we went into lockdown. So I'm like dealing with all that, plus trying to finish a record, you know, all these things going on, and a lot of uncertainty. Should we be spending money on making an album right now? Because we don't really have it and we don't know when it's coming in. But you know what? It's fine. Every day I'm going to do one act of service, when that might mean picking up groceries for somebody who has an immune deficiency. It might be checking on my neighbors who are older and can't go to the grocery store. You know, it might be answering fans' calls and seeing how they're doing. Or taking a call from somebody who's going through a suicidal depression. I had somebody come stay at my place because they relapsed. And I was like, just come hang out here for 2 days. And they didn't want to go to the hospital because people are sick in the hospital. And so they detoxed on my couch. It just is what it is, man. You just, well, that's all we can do.
I think the world could use more people like Tommy Vext, someone that overcomes their personal struggles and recognizes that other people are going through the same thing, and then sets to making sure other people don't have to suffer the way they did. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, please reach out. And if you don't know where to turn, our friends at Heartsupport and the Global Recovery Initiatives Foundation are here to help, and the entire High Notes team is rooting for you. High Notes is a production of Holics.com. I'm your host, James Shotwell. The show is edited and produced by Landon DeFever, with original music from the band You, Me, and Everyone We Know. The art for High Notes was created by the great Nick Farron. If you'd like to learn more about the show, please find us on social media or by visiting highnotespod.com. There are more episodes in Season 1, with many more planned for later in the year, so please stick around. We'd love to have you.